On today's show, it's time to talk fake trades. We're going to talk some good ones, we're going to talk some bad ones, and we're going to talk some fake trades somewhere in the middle. That's all straight ahead on today's edition of Locked On Cavs.
You are Locked On Cavs, your daily Cleveland Cavaliers podcast.
Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
What's up, everybody? My name's Danny Cunningham. You might know me from my time covering the Cleveland Cavaliers, places like my Substack, The Inside Shot, Cleveland Magazine, 92.3 The Fan, and a number of other stops along the way. I want to say thank you to you for making Locked On Cavs your first listen today and every day. You can find the show anywhere you get your podcasts, Apple, Spotify, anywhere else. Drop us a 5-star rating. Leave us a nice review. Be a friend. Tell a friend about the show. If you're watching on YouTube, do me a favor, hit that thumbs up button for me as well. Click that notification bell and make sure you hit subscribe so you don't miss the latest Locked On Cavs content right here every single day. And today's episode, of course, brought to you by FanDuel, because right now new FanDuel customers can get $200 in bonus bets when your first $5 bet wins. It's $200 in bonus bets when that first $5 bet wins. I put out the ask on social media on Monday, maybe early evening, late afternoon, we'll call it, asking for your favorite or least favorite fake trades. I would like to do another episode like this. So if you're watching on YouTube, as we get started here, drop in the comments your favorite or least favorite fake trades that you have seen for the Cavs, and we will be grading them on another episode later this week. Going to get some more in, but there were a couple that I wanted to do more realistic ones today because there are some. And I think coming up in this third segment, I want to talk about why this is such a pivotal and important offseason for the Cavs and why it is a very challenging offseason for the Cavs. But I do want to say first, thank you to everyone that did send in the fake trades that they sent in. There were a lot of submissions, and part of the problem with some of those submissions is something I will talk about coming up in segment number 3. But the first fake trade that I wanted to get to, and it's funny because the stipulation I put when I went on to social media about, when you send my fake trades in, they need to work in the Spotrac trade machine. And the first one I'm going to bring up does not work in the trade machine. But the reason why I've got this trade up, and if you're watching on YouTube, you can see what the trade is. If you're listening, it is the Cavs send Jarrett Allen and Isaac Okoro to the Sacramento Kings in exchange for Malik Monk and Jonas Valanciunas. Now, this trade does not work because when you are on the second apron, as the Cavs are operating in, you cannot aggregate salaries. Now, you can aggregate salaries if the deal gets you out of the second apron, and then you are hard capped at the second apron. This does not do that. This would save some money for the Cavs, a little bit under $2 million, but not enough to get them out of the second apron. So why did I include it? I included it because the way this would work, and the Cavs could do this because they would then break this trade up into 2 separate trades. This would be essentially Jarrett Allen for Malik Monk, Jonas Valanciunas for Isaac Okoro. And this is a deal that I do like. I wouldn't give this trade an A by any stretch of the imagination. I think this trade is more along the lines of like a B type trade, maybe a B- type trade, because if you look at that trade, I think Malik Monk is a good player. I think Jonas Valanciunas is a pretty good backup big. Jarrett Allen is the best player in that trade, and the Cavs would be giving up the best player. And anytime you are giving up the best player in a trade, especially one that is on an affordable salary, the way that Jarrett Allen is, it's hard for me to give that trade a really good one. And Isaac Okoro, of course, is somebody that the Cavs are currently looking for a landing spot for. I do think that they would like to trade him between now and the start of next season for some financial relief. Okoro, of course, makes $11 million annually at this point. So this deal would be Jarrett Allen for Malik Monk and Isaac Okoro for Jonas Valanciunas, because those are the salaries that match up. Valanciunas makes $10 million a year. Okoro makes 11. So you would trade Isaac Okoro for Jonas Valanciunas, and then you would trade Jarrett Allen, who makes $20 million a year, for Malik Monk, who makes like $18.5 million per year. So that is how, despite that graphic saying this trade does not work in the trade machine, that's how you would get around it. You would be doing 2 separate smaller trades that we would all judge as one trade, but they would be 2 separate trades. And I think that this trade makes sense for the Cavs in some respects because One, they are looking to get off of Okoro. I think that's a pretty open secret at this point. I also have talked about wanting to see Evan Mobley play more center, not just now, but into the future. And he has, in his career, played more center every year as we've gone. He started off even playing a little bit of small forward at times, but he has played mostly power forward. And then this year it shifted where actually a very slight majority of his minutes came playing center. That is something that has bared fruit for the Cavs. They've been better as a basketball team, particularly recently when he plays center, when he is the lone big on the floor. So you might be asking, okay, well, if that's the case, then why are we trading Jarrett Allen for another big? And I think that's the case because you can't have Evan, in my opinion, play center every minute that he's out there. I think it should probably be like 65-35, 65% of his minutes at center, 35% of his minutes at power forward. And when you have a center like Jarrett Allen, I think that's a hard thing to pull off because that would essentially mean, well, Jarrett Allen can only then play at most 35% of the minutes available because if he's on the floor, he's going to be playing center. That's a hard thing to do for Jarrett Allen. You're not getting the most out of Jarrett Allen if you're doing that. If you were only playing Valanciunas 35% of the minutes, that's probably about where you're getting the most out of him. And yes, maybe it's a little bit more than that because, of course, Evan Mobley can't play every single minute. But if you look at this and say, well, can we find a center in Cleveland that plays roughly 20 minutes a night and is effective? And the other 28 minutes of center play can be Evan Mobley. That is where he can shine. Or maybe you have a third big too that can play a little bit. So Mobley's not playing center for all of those minutes, but he's playing center for some of those minutes. I think that's probably the sweet spot where the Cavs would like to be. I think that from a team building standpoint is a place that does make sense. And then as you talk about Malik Monk in this deal too, he is somebody that can do a little bit of creating. I think he's probably a better shooter overall than what his numbers in Sacramento have been. If you go back and look at the shooter that he's been at times in his career, and of course, it's not a guarantee. Like you cannot guarantee that somebody's going to come in and be a great shooter. In his career, he's a 35% three-point shooter. While he's been in Sacramento, he's been a 34% three-point shooter. That is sort of boosted up a little bit by his 1 year with the Lakers where he shot 39%. Now, what did he have that year in the Lakers? He had some great playmaking around him. He had LeBron James. He had somebody who could help to create open shots. And I think that it's fair to say, not that Sacramento has not had good point guards, because I do think, obviously, while De'Aaron Fox was there, De'Aaron Fox was a very good point guard. I don't know that he's been alongside the type of playmaking since. It's not to say that he would automatically get back and be near a 40% shooter, but he was also a 40% shooter in Charlotte. And what did Charlotte have that year? I believe that was LaMelo Ball's rookie season. And that is, I think, when LaMelo Ball was sort of at his best. So if you want to go back and look at that, it's like, okay, this is how it could make sense, because then you could say, well, in Cleveland with Darius Garland, with Donovan Mitchell, even with Evan Mobley. And of course, I should bring up Domantas Sabonis as a playmaker for the Kings too, because he certainly handles a lot of that duty. But I do think that having a little bit more playmaking around him and a little bit more space around him would be something that helps to elevate his shooting back to where it was. I don't think that he is a 32% three-point shooter. I think that is a drastically bad number for a guy as talented as him. I don't know if he's a 40% three-point shooter either. He's probably somewhere in the middle there. But I do think that this is a trade that, while the Cavs are giving up the best player in this deal, and that's never a comfortable place or a fun place to be, and I understand that, I think that this is a trade that if you are going to rearrange your roster, and maybe the Cavs don't get essentially better from this deal. They get different, certainly. I don't know that they get drastically better, but they get different. And that might be a place where their difference could boost them up a step. And I think that is something that could be a good idea for the Cavs, getting off Isaac Okoro, something that obviously they do want to do. That is something that we need to talk about a little bit more next, because I've got another trade that I think carries a little bit more risk. I don't know if both sides would say yes, but it's one I do like for the Cavs. We're going to talk about that next right here on Locked on Cavs. Today's show brought to you by FanDuel. The NBA playoffs in full swing, NHL playoffs in full swing, baseball in full swing, and every night, no matter the sport, delivers highlight-worthy performances, major momentum shifts, and can't-miss moments. Whether it's a game-winning shot or a breakout player, there's never been a better time to get in on the action than right now with FanDuel, because FanDuel makes it easy to stay in the game. Before tip-off, live, whatever you're into, FanDuel has it. Player props, performance trends, same-game parlays. Fans have more ways than ever to play smart and win big. Game 5 was last night in the NBA Finals. I don't know what happened because I'm recording this at 6:45 on Monday night. Maybe the Pacers won. Maybe they have a chance to win the title on their home floor on Thursday. Maybe the Thunder won. Maybe they have a chance to go into Indy on Thursday and win their franchise's first championship. I have no idea, but I bet one of those things happened, and you can bet on what's going to happen next with FanDuel. So if you're new to FanDuel, now is the perfect time to sign up. Head to FanDuel.com. That is FanDuel.com. Place your first $5 bet. If that $5 bet wins, you get $200 in bonus bets. Make every moment more with FanDuel, an official sports betting partner of the NBA. Thank you again for making Locked on Cavs your first listen today and every day. Like I said earlier, you can find the show anywhere you get your podcasts. Apple, Spotify, anywhere else. Make sure you drop us a 5-star rating. Leave us a nice review. Be a friend. Tell a friend about Locked on Cavs. And the next trade that I wanted to bring up was another Isaac Okoro trade. And this is one that, yes, it does work in the Spotrac trade machine. This deal sends Isaac Okoro to the Chicago Bulls, plus a second-round pick this year. I put the number 48 pick, which is the Cavs' first pick in this draft, in exchange for Lonzo Ball. Lonzo Ball makes $10 million a year. Isaac Okoro makes $11 million a year. I think this is a risk for the Cavs, certainly. I think that they would be getting the better player in this deal, but the issue is Lonzo Ball is very rarely healthy. I think that's pretty widely known. If you watch basketball, you probably haven't seen much of Lonzo Ball lately because he doesn't play very frequently. And we are at the point where the idea of Lonzo Ball is better than who Lonzo Ball actually is. But if Lonzo Ball were healthy, I think he would be a dramatic help for the Cleveland Cavaliers because he provides a lot of the things that the Cavs were missing in the postseason. You have heard me pretty frequently talk about the Cavs needing a little bit more, ball handling against pressure. That is what Lonzo Ball excels at. They need a little bit more playmaking on the perimeter. Lonzo Ball does that. He can come off the bench and do that, I think, even in a way that Ty Jerome can't. Like if you're looking to, maybe if Ty Jerome is gone and you're looking for a different backup point guard, this type of deal, I think, would be a really, really good one for the Cavs. It just comes with the huge if Lonzo Ball is healthy. That is the biggest challenge there. If Lonzo Ball is healthy, I think it would be a great deal for the Cavs. If he's not, this would be essentially you kind of wasted not a trade chip in Isaac Okoro, because I do not think that he is viewed right now as a positive asset. If he were, I think we would be hearing a lot more about the Cavs having traction on a deal as the real start of the offseason approaches. But I'm not sure Lonzo Ball is viewed that much differently either, just because of all the injury red flags that he's had. And listen, maybe that is too much of a risk for the Cavs, and I could not blame them one bit if that's not the direction that they would want to go. But I look at this trade as sort of a challenge trade, where has Isaac Okoro reached his full potential in Cleveland? No, I don't think so. I think that he could have, if you simulate his career 10 times, this is probably like, I don't know, the 6th best outcome for him. I think that there are a lot of worlds where he turns into a better basketball player than what he's been. I do think that his offensive growth was kind of stunted in previous years under JB Bickerstaff. Maybe he's just not the offensive player the Cavs and certainly other teams thought he would be coming out of Auburn a few years back. But I also don't think that he's been the greatest development story either. And Lonzo Ball has not had the career that anybody envisioned for him when he was the number 2 overall pick coming out of UCLA, what feels like a decade ago at this point. And maybe it was a decade ago at this point, I guess. Wow. But if you look at what he can do, just in theory, what he provides, I think that is kind of a lot of what the Cavs are looking for. And I do wonder if because of the injuries, this could be a deal that sort of makes some sense for both sides. The last trade I wanted to talk about today is a big one. If you're watching on YouTube, you can see the graphic up now. If you're not watching, here is the deal. The Cleveland Cavaliers get Austin Reeves, Dalton Connect, and Walker Kessler from the Los Angeles Lakers, of course, Reeves and Connect, and Kessler from the Utah Jazz. The Los Angeles Lakers would get Jarrett Allen, and the Utah Jazz would get Dean Wade, Jalen Tyson, Craig Porter Jr., and a 2031 unprotected first-round pick from the Cleveland Cavaliers. If this is a trade that is on the table, the Cavs should absolutely do it. That said, I do not see a world in which the Utah Jazz would say yes to that. The Jazz are not in a position right now where they're just trying to dump off players. Are they in a position where they're trying to win a championship? No, of course not. But they're also not in a position where they're just going to give Walker Kessler away. And if they were going to trade Walker Kessler, I think that they could do a lot better than getting just kind of pieces and parts for the Cavs. Like, we don't know what Jalen Tyson is going to be. I think Craig Porter Jr. is a fine young player, but I think that they could do a lot better than they could get a lot better combination for Kessler than one first round pick that just solely because of Evan Mobley, I don't think that anyone projects to be very good, and pieces and parts. Like, I think they would either need to get back pieces and parts in like 2 or 3 solid first round picks, or a good player and some mediocre picks. That's just kind of a mediocre pick and some players. Like, that is not a deal that I think they would do. I do wonder. I don't think that the Lakers would trade Austin Reeves for Jarrett Allen. I don't. Now, if that were the case, the Cavs should do that. I don't believe that the Lakers would want to do that. I just don't think that is an area where they would be willing to give up Reeves. Now, Allen would be a perfect fit in Los Angeles. Jarrett Allen is everything the Los Angeles Lakers need and should be looking for in a center. He's obviously a very good defender. He's a terrific screen setter. He's a great lob threat. I think that alongside Luka Doncic and LeBron James, I don't know of how many centers that can't shoot from the outside are better fits for them than Jarrett Allen is. Because that is the thing that you look at and say, that is what that team so drastically needs. But it becomes really difficult for me to see all 3 teams saying yes to that one. That's just not where I think anybody would end up going. And there were some other trades that I don't have graphics for, but I did want to talk about because one of them was really interesting to me. And I didn't put a graphic together because it's not the deal that I think works completely, because draft compensation would be put in. But Brian tweeted at me and said, the Cavs get Lonzo Ball and Jaden McDaniels. The Minnesota Timberwolves get Darius Garland. And the Chicago Bulls get Mike Conley Jr. and Rob Dillingham. That is a trade that interests me. Now, I don't think that's enough for Darius Garland. While I really like Jaden McDaniels, I just talked for 3 minutes about all of the injury risk that Lonzo Ball brings with him. If there's a way, and I tried playing around on the trade machine, and I'm going to get to this in a minute, but it's very difficult, and I just don't know that there is a way to include Rob Dillingham ending up in Cleveland in that deal because of the way salaries are set up and because of all these restrictions. If there was a way to get Jaden McDaniels and Rob Dillingham for Darius Garland, that is one of the very few Darius Garland trades that I would consider, because there are a lot of Darius Garland trades that have been thrown out there over the last couple of weeks, over the last month or so, that I think are really, really bad trades, that I think the Cavs would get worse, and I really don't see the upside to. There are a lot of trades that I just don't think make sense. There are some that make sense, but there are a lot of them that do not make sense. This is one of the few ones that I look at and say, this is something that I would have to at the very least think about. Now, if it's Lonzo Ball and Jaden McDaniels, I think the Cavs would probably need significant draft compensation to do that, because 1, they are giving up the best player by far in that deal, and 2, they're getting back a pretty significant injury risk to replace him. And all of this is incredibly difficult to navigate. And that is one of the things that I'm not going to say that I sat here and learned today because I knew this going in, but going through the exercise of trying to find a bunch of really good trades that both teams would say yes to, that also move the needle, is a really, really difficult task. That's why I think this offseason is maybe the most important one that Koby Altman's had. We're going to talk about that next right here on Locked On Cavs. Thank you again for watching Locked On Cavs on YouTube. If you are watching, hit that thumbs up button for me, click subscribe, hit that notification bell so you don't miss the latest from me. And part of this exercise was figuring out exactly just how difficult, how restrictive the current environment is in the NBA. Because I am, if you've been listening to the show or if you've been reading what I write, I'm a proponent of the Cavs shaking things up this summer. I don't think they need to make massive moves, but I do think they need to make some moves. But the Cavs are in a very interesting situation as you look at this, because with the new collective bargaining agreement and all the restrictions for second apron teams, it's a really difficult place to live. And that's where the Cavs are living next year and probably the year after that. But not only what makes it so challenging is the restrictions that they have, but how their contracts are balanced. And I do think that this is an exercise that we are seeing Memphis kind of go through right now. And that's why that trade is so interesting to me on the other end for Orlando. Because next year, the Cavs, for all intents and purposes, are going to have three guys making $40 million. Donovan Mitchell and Evan Mobley will both be making $46.3 million next year. Darius Garland will be making $39.4 million. So we are just going to call, for the sake of this exercise, Darius Garland a $40 million player. So those guys are very difficult to trade because if you're going to trade them, you cannot aggregate their salaries unless you're going to get under the second apron, which if you're trading a $46 million player, I would imagine Mitchell or Mobley, and those guys are not available, but just for the sake of this discussion. So maybe it should be, if you're trading a $40 million player in Garland, you're going to have to find a way to get equal talent back while also splitting that up into different salaries. And part of the challenge for the Cavs is they essentially have four guys on what should be looked at as pretty tradable contracts in DeAndre Hunter, who there's no reason to believe the Cavs have interest in trading him. Jarrett Allen, who, again, I have said constantly should be the guy that we look at as the Cavs potentially try and make a move. Max Strus, who I don't think the Cavs want to trade, but I don't think that he's some untouchable guy. And Isaac Okoro, who I do not believe has positive value on the market. I think the Cavs at this point would probably have to attach draft compensation to move on from him. And then you get to a guy like Dean Wade, who he has a very team-friendly contract. And I do think the Cavs should consider trading him. But part of the issue with having a very team-friendly contract is if the Cavs were to trade Dean Wade, they could not receive back more than $6.6 million in any deal. That is a challenge because how many players can you find that fit the Cavs as well as Dean Wade does? Or I guess maybe the idea of Dean Wade, because I do not think he shoots enough, that make that amount of money. It's hard to find that fit. That is why this is, I think, the most important offseason that Koby Altman has had as the lead decision maker of the Cleveland Cavaliers. Now, you could go back and say, well, what about the offseason going into LeBron's last year? And that is fair. Like that would be a fair comparison. But I think it's more difficult now in the current environment to build, especially when you're not a year and a half removed from a championship, the way the Cavs were back really less than a year or just a little over a year removed from a championship, the way the Cavs back were in the summer of 2017. They're now with a brand new core from that. They are championship contenders, but they need a little bit more. And it's going to be really difficult, I think, for them to find a little bit more in this current environment because what we know, and we don't know everything about this new CBA because it hasn't been around long enough for us to know exactly how everything is going to work and how teams are going to approach things. And that is part of the other challenge. That is also something that I do think should be viewed as an opportunity, that you can be sort of I don't know if pioneer is the right way you can be on the forefront of some things. And you can find, I think, when you are in a new set of rules, the way the NBA is right now, you can find a new way you can find the loopholes first, if that makes sense. You can find ways around things first. It's an opportunity to be very creative, I guess, probably is the best way to say that. And I think that's what the Cavs are going to have to do. they're going to have to find ways to be very creative, because there's going to come a time in the not so distant future that they're going to need to find ways to cut salary. They're going to need to go through what the Boston Celtics are going to go through this summer, where you've heard so many rumors out there about the Celtics wanting to trade Drew Holiday, about wanting to trade Kristaps Porzingis, because they can't live in the second apron forever. I think we'd be hearing these conversations even if Jason Tatum didn't get hurt in the conference finals. The Boston Celtics were always going to have to go in this direction. The Cavs, at a certain point, probably 2 summers from right now, are going to have to go in that direction. So that leads you to think, okay, well, this means there is limited time that the Cavs have this contention window. And I talked a little bit on yesterday's show about where FanDuel views the Cavs as the second best team in basketball. But that gap between them and OKC, just viewed by FanDuel, is rather significant. They need to find a way to close that gap, and they need to find a way to do it while being very, very restricted, because it's not as if they can go make these very easy win now trades and increase their salary and just go all in. They are financially about as all in as they can be. Now, if they sign Ty Jerome and Sam Merrill, that would be kind of the only thing they can do to further push themselves deeper in financially, but they are incredibly expensive. And when you get to this point, really the only way you can go is down. That is one of the things that you look at and say, okay, well, how can they maybe go down a little bit while also getting better? It's a very, very tight needle for the Cavs to thread, and that's going to be the challenge that Koby Altman has this summer. If you don't believe me, go play around on the trade machine. Make sure when you go to Spotrac, you set the operating year to 2025, 2026. It's like playing My GM on 2K on expert mode. That is what this has become. It's not as if the trade machine is not any fun anymore, because that's not true. We all know the trade machine is a lot of fun, but boy, it's going to be really, really difficult for the Cavs to find a deal that makes them better without giving up too much. And even then, it's a big challenge for Koby Altman and company in the Cavs front office. But thank you for making Locked On Cavs your first listen today and every day. You can find us anywhere you get your podcasts, Apple, Spotify, anywhere else. As we get out of here, do me a favor on YouTube. Hit that thumbs up button for me. Click subscribe, hit that notification bell, and I'll be back tomorrow talking more about the Cleveland Cavaliers.